Well, the jury has made a statement, and a very bold statement at that. Chad Daybell is guilty on all accounts. And guess what? He was sentenced to death. Well, we're going to talk about the highlights of the trial and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster's Crime Talk. It's what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, we want to welcome all of you to the new Charlie Crime Talk. This is the way that we've launched our YouTube channel. We're really excited about all the great support we're getting from all you good folks out there. So we want to say, James and I both, thank you so much for being a part of the Charlie Crime family, particularly in this new endeavor of launching our YouTube channel. We've received a lot of great support and feedback from you, and we welcome a lot more. Of course, if you'd like to reach out to me, you can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the program, well, go right on over to peacemakernetwork.com. As James and I tell you, week after week, we support those men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. So go on over to peacemakernetwork.com, check that out. You can even become a badge supporter, become a part of the team, if you know what I mean. And also, we always urge you to go to our website, charliecrimebuster.com. So, James, we got a lot of things going, don't we?
Oh, we do. We have a lot of things going. The YouTube channel is blowing up, which is great. That's great news. So, yeah, thanks for plugging it again. That's always helpful. But before we get into the highlights, was there ever, and we're talking about the Chad Daybell trial, but was there ever a time when you thought that the jury might vote not guilty?
Well, James, that's a really good question. And I got to tell you that I don't know of a single time that I ever even entertained the thought that the jury would come back with a not guilty verdict. And I'll tell you why I brought myself to that point. What I tried to do was to put myself in the jury box as a juror myself.
Good approach.
And yeah, and I thought that what I was listening to, that there was plenty of evidence to not only prove it, but to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think anybody, if you were to put yourself in that juror box yourself, as you listen to that, I just don't see any way you could not come out of there without saying guilty. And you know, the interesting thing about it, when you hear that plea, it was guilty on every single count.
Yep.
And the whole, you know, they only needed one of those details to prove for the death penalty, and they went way beyond one, like 6 of them. So
they did,
you know, yeah. So they would basically sentence him to die 6 times. So yeah, no, I really never doubted it. How about you?
One of the things that kind of concerned me from the get-go, and I'm just going to be transparent because I mentioned this last week, and I want to bring it up again, was why was the jury instructed to go for the first-degree murder instead of like manslaughter for the children? Because he was not directly involved in the process.
Well, yeah, I could understand people thinking that, but just keep in mind that a good analogy, I think, is if you're going to go rob a bank and you're the wheelman and you're sitting out there in the vehicle, and while your buddy, don't say that I'm your buddy for this, I don't want to be a bank robber, but your buddy is in the bank and something goes wrong and he ends up shooting the security officer and kills him. Guess what? The law says you are sitting out there in the car who's a part of that crime, you're guilty of murder just like your buddy was who was in there that shot the guy. So, you know, it's not an idea of whether, you know, a manslaughter is more like, hey, you know, it was an accident. I was careless. This was no accident. He wasn't careless. it was, in my opinion, cold-blooded murder.
Okay. I was just curious because that's one of
Sure.
the things I mean, when a jury's given instructions and they have to find him guilty of first degree murder, it's like, you're pigeonholing him into a specific, destination and not allowing the jury to make the decision on what the charge should be.
Yeah, and I, I would point out that that's usually the prosecution that does that. They're the one that made the charges, and
Uh,
I don't believe the prosecution wanted to give them any leeway. I don't believe the prosecution did not want to leave any opportunity for the jury to go away from that murder charge. They were, I
mhm.
mean, they were bent on throwing the book to him, and they not only threw the book, they threw the whole library to him.
Right,
I
right.
mean, he was convicted and actually sentenced to death. So again, the prosecution could have said, "Hey, we want to give you some lesser charges to consider," but they did not want to do that. They wanted to go for the murder verdict.
Well, you settled early on the guilty verdict. And why were you so sure about that verdict?
Well, I guess because James, gosh, we've been following this case for what, 5 years almost.
Yeah, it's been about that long, yeah.
Yeah, if I can't make up my mind in 5 years, I don't think I could ever make up my mind. And we have covered a ton of material
We
when you
have.
think
Yeah,
about
we
it.
have.
All the way back when we first started, people did not know where the children were. They had
Yep,
not been found.
that's true.
Some people were saying, well, they're off at some place, maybe a bunker somewhere, and she was just trying to hide the kids from, the grandmother Kay. And some people were saying that, but as you know, at the very beginning, we sadly predicted that the children were probably dead, and
Hmm.
and even while we were talking about it at that point, when you look at the timeline, they had already been killed, and people
Right.
were looking for those kids, and so I guess the reason I could settle so early in the trial was that it wasn't me. It wasn't the beginning for you or me with this trial. We had gone through Lori Vallow's trial, and we'd gone through this entire case for over 4 years.
Yep, we have. It's been a while. Well, one of the highlights was the cross examinations of Chad's kids and the rebuttal witnesses. So, why was that an important highlight
Well,
of the case?
I went back and I said, okay, what are the highlights of the case? And the reason why I thought I would include for our audience the highlights of the children, and we're saying children, but we all have to keep in mind they are an adult children.
Right.
It's not like they're 6 or 7 or 8 or 9,
Hmm.
but they're still children. If you're a father and I'm a father, and they're your kids, whether they're going to be 4 years old or 40 years of age,
Right.
they're still your kids, right? So I can certainly feel for them, but I think Pryor knew that the very best chance, and we've talked about Pryor, you and I both together. He's a really good attorney, and I think the best chance he had was to try to slip in some doubt about Chad murdering Tammy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the only way he could do that would be to prove that Tammy was not in good health and that she had medical problems
Hmm.
and that it was a natural death, like the first coroner ruled when they first came to the home and the first part of the investigation was.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, in order to prove that, he had to bring the children on. Now, that was I think it was a highlight moment because if the jury were to believe those children, if they believed them
Hmm.
that there
Hmm.
was that, then he might have skated on that charge of being guilty of the murder of Tammy. Now, then the other thing is, attorneys know this, particularly defense attorneys. If they can find any place at all to get you to doubt, then that gives them a lot more strength to try to get the jury to doubt other things as well.
Right. Right.
Well, if the prosecution was wrong in bringing Tammy here, if the prosecution, if they reached too far with Tammy, maybe they reached too far somewhere else.
Right.
So if he can get that foothold in there, then that can make the difference. And if as they testified, the jury believed them, then I believe he would have a chance. Now, a rebuttal witness, as most of us know, and maybe some of our listeners may not know this, but a rebuttal witness can only come back to testify against one part or something that the defense put on that they believe they can prove that they were in error in putting that on.
Mm-hmm.
A rebuttal witness can't get up there and go through the whole thing of everything they saw. It has to be narrowly defined to the things that they spoke about in their testimony. And as they came, the rebuttal witnesses came. I believe that the prosecution, and a lot of times it's really kind of it's not. It is really a little rare that prosecution brings rebuttal witnesses. Usually that's done on the other side.
Right.
But and I thought that was very interesting because if you know, I don't even know that they had literally planned to do this in advance because they had released those witnesses. They released them from the
Right.
subpoena.
Right.
And they actually lost, I think, we know one witness, maybe two witnesses, they
Right.
could not bring in because they had viewed the trial and listened to the trial
Right.
after they were released from the subpoena. So
Exactly.
I don't believe the prosecution planned to do that, but I think when they saw that Tammy's children were saying this, they said we've got to somehow come back and we have to rebut this. And I think it was a really stroke of genius on their part to argue successfully that they could bring those rebuttal witnesses in. And I think those rebuttal witnesses really, really in the jury's mind, I believe the rebuttal witnesses, because I mean, it was shocking,
Mm-hmm.
they proved that Elma had several thoughts about how Tammy died, not just one.
Right.
They proved that Garth had told his friend
Okay.
that when he got home, his
Yep.
dad wasn't there. I mean, those were what I call those gotcha moments,
Right.
and
Right.
I think that really, I think that really drove it home to the jury that we all can understand these children wanting to stand up for their dad, but they really were not that credible.
Right. Well, speaking of witnesses, you called it the battle of the experts, the expert witnesses. Which expert in this trial were you most impressed with?
Well, there were two people that really stood up to me. One was the FBI agent who had traced the GPS and several different things there. The reason why I was impressed with him was I thought, and I don't know how you felt about it, but I tell you, I think Pryor can be really strong with cross examination. I mean,
Yeah, he is.
his method is really good. He gets up there, he's very, friendly and kind. And
Yep.
boy, before you know it, he turns right around and he throws that arrow right through you. He comes right at you, and he comes pretty strong at you,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
which is a good attorney will do that, and he did that.
Great tactic. Yeah.
And I could see that some of the witnesses they were shook up by that tactic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're taken.
Mm-hmm.
But that one FBI agent who stood there, I mean, it was really interesting to me. I mean, he just he was confident. He wasn't shook at all, and you can always tell when the witness is winning, because when Pryor realizes that, he says, if I keep going at this guy, I'm just hurting myself. And he backed
Mm-hmm.
right down real quick, and it was a very short cross-examination. And then the other expert that I thought was by far the most credible was the medical examiner that they used when they
Christensen.
exhumed,
Yep.
when they exhumed Tammy's body.
Yep.
I thought he spoke well. He thoroughly researched it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I forget how many months that he spent on it, but it was almost over a year that he
Mm-hmm.
spent to putting that together, and he had all that down. And I think that to me, that one witness right there, in my mind, certainly convinced me that Tammy was murdered more than anything else. Now, I think the other witnesses that came and said, "Hey, she's in great health," and boy, they brought person after person after person after person that did that. I thought that was good. But I think even with that, we can interpret things well. I might come across like I'm as healthy as Mike Tyson to my friends around me, but I can tell you, James, I'm not.
Right, right.
Well, I don't. Maybe I should use Tyson. I heard he was in the hospital the other day. Or
Right, right.
He had a medical thing, but I mean, that people can interpret that any way. But when a medical examiner speaks and when he did all of that research, I think he was by far the most credible of it all. And prior experts were good. They just didn't have anything much to deal with.
Yeah, that's true. What about Zulema and her journal? What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think that was yeah. Anytime you have a journal introduced into trials, I don't know what it is. I think that we're still fascinated with the idea of journaling. I don't know how long that'll be in this digital world,
right?
But right now and for years it's been. And when they bring a journal together, people usually think this is something that you wrote prior to being there. You dated it, you kept it up, and everything. Yeah, I think that spoke volumes as well.
Yeah. There was some highlights that you pointed out about the text messages. Is there one that you think that kind of stands out to you as most impressed you the most?
Well, that's a difficult question because
there were several. I know.
What? How many? Do you remember how many thousand there were?
I think it was over 10. Over 10.
Oh yeah, I thought like 14,000 or something other. Maybe more than that. I 40,000 comes to my mind, but I don't know. I just know there was a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
And I did read how many there were. I mean, can you imagine being the investigator that had to go through all those?
I was just getting ready to say the same thing. I was like, can you imagine having to go over 14,000 text messages?
Yeah.
And then at the same time decipher it by looking at the code.
Oh yeah,
what they were trying to say.
Yeah, and then
decoding it.
and keep from throwing up when they act like junior hires out there,
right,
back and forth to it. So that guy deserves a medal, I think, don't you?
Hey, yeah. I agree.
I think that and the prosecution was right on line when they did this, and I was listening actually today to juror, I think was juror number 8 or something like that in the Lori Vallow trial. And he was being interviewed on a program, and I was listening to that interview, and I thought it was amazing because he did bring this out. He brought out that he had so much knowledge from the Lori Vallow trial, but he said there was a whole lot more evidence brought in Chad's trial than Lori's trial, and that he did see a lot of new stuff that he had not seen. And this is from a juror in Lori's trial. So, and I believe that last group of text messages really, really, really sunk Chad. And if I look down at them, there's a lot of them. There's of course the text message about people becoming zombies, going light and dark, and and having, and then the text about the death scale. Wow, that was incredible. But I think probably the one that really probably sealed it for Chad was when she asked, "Is there a plan for the kids?" And he came back and said, "Yes, there's definitely a plan for the kids."
Right.
And you're sitting there as a juror and you're saying, okay, there's pre-medication. There's, it's no doubt about it. This was a forethought process. They thought this before. It was premeditated. And I think if I were to say the one that stood out is all that background, and then on top of that background of people going light and dark and the scale of death, then you come up and say, is there a plan for the kids? And this isn't Lori saying that she's making a plan. She's coming to Chad and says, Chad, is there a plan?
Right.
And Chad's saying, yes, there's a plan, because, the real hurdle that the prosecution had to get over is taking the blame away from Lori, even though Lori has already been found guilty,
right,
and putting it on Chad.
Right.
And, there were some people who rightly thought, because they probably hadn't had all this information, that, maybe Chad was just duped, and he was, I think it was Pryor that brought. Remember when he brought Chad's mom on the
Yeah,
stand,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and said, "Yeah, your son's not a worldly man, is he?"
Right.
She said, "No, he's not. He's shy, isn't he?
He's shy. Yeah.
He's not used to relationships, is he? In other words, Pryor was saying this blonde bomb who was Miss Texas walked in the room and just knocked your son out of his socks,
Right. Right.
and there was a danger that people could feel that way, and
Right.
and take all the blame away. But those texts and the way that she came and said, "Is there a plan?" And he said, "Yes, there's a plan." And when he started talking about this dark stuff of people getting near the death, even his wife getting near the death, I think that suddenly in the mind of the juries, they didn't see a guy that was duped. They saw a guy that was actually involved in the planning of these murders.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The mastermind. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. You mentioned phone calls in the podcast, but matter of fact, you even played one. Um, which one do you think was most effective in the trial, and why?
Well, well, we introduced the highlights of the phone calls. I thought that was very important for one reason. Um, People are swayed by emotion.
Hmm.
You know that, I know that. And we know that even I don't care how many times the judge gets up there and says, you got to base this on the facts, just the
Hmm.
facts, just
Hmm.
the evidence. We can't entirely do that, James, because we are emotional people. We are
That's
built
right.
with emotion.
That's
And
interesting. You should say that real quick. Nick, juror number 9, he pointed that
right.
out in the interview with one of the television stations. He pointed out the fact that when they showed Tylee's remains and they showed JJ remains, he said you could not help but not get emotionally involved. He
Boy,
said
that's
that
the
played a
truth.
huge factor in their decision making process.
Yeah, it is true. And following that, the reason I presented the phone calls was not the juror's emotion, but I've never seen such a contrast in emotions than two phone calls. The first phone call was Chad talking to Lori while she was in jail and he was
Right,
free.
right,
And they were talking about the contractor that they had, which was their
hmm,
spiritual hitman,
right,
Alex.
right,
And they were talking about, the blueprint, which was
right,
the scheme that they put together, and that there was trouble with the blueprint. You dig in
right.
the backyard and you have trouble and all that. But I even remember people commenting on this. It was eerie because Chad would just giggle
Right,
like a little junior high guy.
right.
Just laugh. And
Yeah.
and she said, "Well, what did he say about that?" And when she said what he said about that, they're talking about her dead brother that Chad allegedly is supposed to be speaking to. And he
Hmm.
said, "Well, he didn't say anything. He just laughed. He just laughed. And it was so giddy back and forth. And so you see that emotion. So I wanted to play then on the episode the next phone call, which was like a day or two afterwards,
Yeah.
when Chad realized that they were digging in the backyard. There wasn't any giggling
Nope.
in that phone call.
That was very telling.
There wasn't any laughter. It was dead serious, and you could see the tension. I mean, you can see it. I could feel it. I
Yeah.
could feel it in their voices.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The
Yeah.
way he was talking. They're in the backyard.
Yeah.
And should I call you? Well, you could try. I may not be able to reach me. I mean, he knew. He knew that they were right there where those kids were buried, and you can see that much of emotion in those two phone calls. uh,
The
it's very
contrast.
it's very
Yeah.
convincing that he knew exactly what was happening,
Yeah.
when he was there. Yeah.
And definitely the contrast. You could tell that the entire demeanor of both of them was, I mean, just the silences between them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's what added to the tension, of the whole entire conversation. Just those silent moments of just saying, what do I say next? Or how do I respond? Or, what am I going to say, right or wrong?
Yeah, it was like both of them didn't know what to say,
Exactly, exactly. Without revealing, their obvious
Yeah, well,
guilt.
yeah, keep in mind, I'm sure Lori was shocked too, because she didn't know that at that point, you know.
Yeah,
She didn't know
yeah,
they were in the butt when she said that, you know.
right.
Even, you know, her, she wasn't laughing and said, well, you know, he made him a, you know, he told us there was a 99% chance and she'd laugh about it. She wasn't laughing that day.
Well, another telling one was when he was in the back of the police car telling Emma that he won't be back.
Oh yeah.
That
Wow.
was a
Yeah.
dead giveaway.
Yeah. Yeah. He knew he was caught, you know, no doubt about it.
Well, in the sentencing part, Chad uh, didn't do any didn't have any mitigating evidence, nor did he address the victims in the sentencing phase. Do you find that interesting?
You know, I do find it interesting because so many times, you know, when they have these type of cases, uh, the the defendant will usually get up and say, you know, I'm really sorry
Uh huh.
and apologize, or they'll get up and say defiantly, you know, you got the wrong guy.
Right.
But he didn't say anything. He just, you know, he just waved it off. I think, I think it was probably, I think Pryor probably encouraged him not to, and I think it was the best because think about it, James. What could he say?
Yeah.
What could he say that
True.
would move anybody? You know,
Yeah. True.
sorry doesn't cut it, right?
Nope. Nope.
Sorry doesn't cut it. You know,
Nope.
being defiant doesn't cut it. You
Yep.
know, there's really nothing he could absolutely say that would do anything. You know, I mean, and I think Pryor knew that. You know, and I thought, you know, I think what Pryor, I think in my mind, I can see Pryor talking to Chad and said, "Listen, you know, we gave it our best shot. You know, this isn't over. There's all kinds of appeals coming up. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have an appellate attorney assigned to you. You know, there's an automatic appeal right off the bat that you don't even have to appeal. It's just automatic in the death penalty, the first appeal. And
Yeah.
I
42
think,
days. Yeah.
yeah, I think he was just saying to him, you know, hey, our best chance is that this thing is not doing anything now. You know, let's and here's the other thing too. You know, I was hearing people saying today, you know, they were somewhat shocked that at least his kids didn't come up and say, hey, you know, have mercy on my dad. I'm already, you know, already don't have
Right.
my mother, this sort of thing. I would like to think, and I don't know that this is true or not, but I would like to think that Chad, in his own mind, said, "I don't want to put my kids through that." You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to have to get up there. You know, I want to save them that. Nothing they're going to say. It's not going to change anything, no
Right.
matter what they say. So
Right.
you know, they've had enough on them. I hope that he thinks that way, and I think it was good. I would hate for the kids to have to get up and do that because it would be fruitless. There's nothing they could say that would change this jury. You know, this jury was already determined what
Right.
they were going to do.
Yeah. Juror number 9 also mentioned the fact that Colby and Kay's impact statements really played a big part in the actual death
Oh
uh,
yeah,
call on the from the jury.
yeah. The prosecution had nothing to lose with bringing impact statements, but I don't think Chad had anything at all to add to it, and I think it was very wise for Pryor if Pryor was advising him. I think it was a good move on their part.
You know, you talked about a lot about the gotchas and things like that on the last podcast.
Right.
What was how, I guess I should say, in your opinion, do you really think that John Pryor did an effective job for Chad Daybell?
You know, I thought he did a fabulous job. Keep in mind, he was one person.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution had a whole team of people. You know, and I don't know, you know, there have been some people that said that, you know, had Chad decided not to go with Pryor, then, you know, and the state would have provided him legal defense
Right.
and probably a whole team of people.
Right.
But he chose to go with Pryor. And I don't know that you could get a better attorney to defend him than Pryor. He did exceptionally good. The only place that I really feel like Pryor made a mistake, I think, was in the closing. And I'll tell you why I believe that. I think his closing got just way too far out there.
Yeah.
You know, he
Yep.
was throwing. He was just. It's like he's throwing stuff up on the wall, hoping something would stick. I mean,
I was
goodness,
thinking the same thing.
yeah, goodness gracious, thinking, what was really going on was they were going to kill Chad.
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
ridiculous. There's no way in the world you could ever get up that they were going to kill Chad. She was in
Exactly.
love with Chad. She was devoted to Chad. She was going to spend the rest of her life with Chad.
Right.
No, it was really a mistake. Alex was going to kill Chad. That was so unbelievable.
Right.
And then even the point of saying, they killed the kids because they knew too much.
Right.
I doubt in my mind, I doubt the children were there in the room when Charles was shot. I don't believe they were in the room. So yeah, I think what he tried to do at the closing was so unbelievable that the jury just said, hey, these guys, they don't have anything.
Right. Right.
They're just throwing stuff up there. And I think at that point I kind of I kind of not lose my respect, but I kind of say, hey man, you just went too far there.
Yeah, he was grasping at straws there at the end. You could see
he
was really
he appeared to be desperate.
right.
And
Exactly.
maybe he was desperate. I can understand that, but
Well, a
even
man's
if you are
life.
desperate, you don't want to come across as desperate.
Yeah. Well, a man's
because-
life's at stake. So you're gonna grab at whatever you can to try to save his life, right?
Yeah, I'm sure of that, but it just went too far. I mean,
It did.
next thing I expected them to say that the Martians came down, and that they took the kids and took them out the back door, and the kids are really alive, and they're
Right.
in some spaceship, floating around the world. I mean, that's where I thought he made a mistake.
Yeah, I can see that. So what's up next in our upcoming podcast?
Well, I think we've certainly spent a lot of time on this one. By the way, July is when Lori's trial is coming up.
In Arizona.
Actually, August, but there'll be some part of the trial will be in July when they're getting everything ready to go. And in July, remember, we got the Russ trial coming up July the 10th.
That's right.
I think, so we're
That's
gonna
right.
we're gonna get into that. But we're going to spend one more podcast on Chad Daybell, and I want to share with the people, because a lot of people do not know how the death penalty works. They don't know what all's involved in it, and there are some people out there think, okay, well, he's got the death penalty. Next week they're going to strap him down, and they're going to shoot some stuff in his veins, and he's going to die. It's not going to happen that way. I can assure you that. It's going to be a long road, and there's going to be a lot of things that come up. And there are some people that are afraid, that some of these appeals might knock it out. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the things that we can look. I think that we can forecast that might become the basis in which they will appeal this case. We're going to talk about the death penalty. We're going to talk about things in light of it. There's some people who are asking questions like, if the guy's going to go, if he's going to die, why would you give him 15 years for some kind of criminal activity? Well, I'm going to tell people why he did that. We're going to do all that during the next podcast.
Good.
So,
awesome.
Folks, stay tuned. We got one more coming.
All right. Well, take us out.
Well, listen, thank you, folks, for joining James and I as we just talk about the podcast. It's called True Crime Talk. And by the way, James, don't forget, we got to be at that conference next year. I've been hearing a lot of things about it.
Yes. CrimeCon. Yes.
Yep. And so we'll be there next time, so they can come up and actually meet us and talk to us. Right.
That's right.
We would love to do that. But thank you, folks, for being a part of the program tonight. We love talking true crime, and we love the fact that you folks are listening, and that we're bringing some information that's helping you as you follow these cases. And we want to thank you for allowing us to do that. So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.